course. He's in the corner of my screen.
Brilliant, thank you. So, Rachel, I'll leave you to introduce Patrick.
Yeah, so Patrick is from Text Help. He is a wealth of knowledge, and I know that he will just, really dive deep into everything this session. So thank you so much, Patrick. Over to you.
Be careful, Lewis, when say an Irishman is going to dive deep into everything. You could be here for 3 or 4 days, not 60, well, 55 minutes.
We know you try and cap 3 days into one session.
I have my own personal egg timer in Text Help. I'm just saying, I'm just putting it out there now. Thanks, Rachel, and thanks, Emma, as well there. I'm just going to pop on and present my screen. So if you just give me a second or two, I will add this onto your screen. And then, here we go. So I'm just going to maximize this screen, guys. Don't worry, the little purple circle that you're going to see on your screen here, it's not something that comes with the software. This is just because on a large screen, lots of people say, I can't actually see what you clicked there. So this purple circle you'll see will just highlight everything that I do as I go through. One of the things that I want to start with are, I suppose, one is an approach in terms of the software, and the other one is a very practical thing. And then we'll jump right into some of the features that are there, and most importantly, how they translate into supporting the students under your charge. The design thing is that our approach to the software tools that you're going to see here today, and you're going to see a literacy tool and a maths tool. But the design approach is we always come from a perspective of inclusion. And because of that, our design methodology is guided by this concept of universal design for learning. Now, I'm not going to go through that today. If you haven't come across it, don't worry. But the reason I mentioned it at the outset is you're going to see lots and lots of buttons on our tools. And the idea is, from our perspective, that we want to ensure that every student has the unique supports that they need, irrespective of their level or of their ability or their need for, on the inclusion side of things. So you'll see a great wealth of tools. It's not to suggest that students are going to use all of these by any stretch of the imagination, but we want them to have access to those tools, so universal access to the tools, and then select what is more suitable for them. So that's the design piece. And the other piece is, if you have a look at the toolbar at the top of my screen, so this is the Read and Write toolbar. If you haven't seen it before, it's just going to sit right on top of my screen. So if I'm in Google Docs, if I'm in Slides, if I'm on a web page, all of these buttons, these extra buttons will appear here, and that hides behind a little purple puzzle piece. So students know and pupils know they have access to this tool to help support them as they go. So just by clicking on that, they can get access to it. But the second thing I just want to mention before we get into the tools and the features is this, and this is particularly useful for you guys as practitioners dealing with SEND pupils, is that all of the buttons that we saw there are flexible in that we can turn things off. So whilst I'm going to go through lots of them and how they relate to supporting your students, I can turn these off. So if I don't want my students to have access to things like the web search within here, I can turn it off and it'll disappear from the toolbar. I'm mentioning that now because sometimes when you look at the toolbar first, you can think to yourself, well, that would be overwhelming for one of my pupils because there's too many things there to use. I could trim that back down and just leave the features on that are useful to them to support literacy. And the same is true of Equatio when we get to it in about 20 minutes time on the math side. So you have the ability to control that student by student or even across the entire school and put a more minimalistic view on the toolbar. So that's enough of the practical stuff. Let's jump into the actual features and how they might support. So let's take something fairly obvious from Read and Write first of all. And I want to show you this feature, which is just the play feature, which is just text to speech. Okay, so if I operate text to speech.
It may seem like the earth is made up of one big solid rock, but it's really made up of a number of...
Now, there's a couple of things to flag here in terms of how this can help students. So one thing you'll see there is that is dual highlighted. So the sentence will be highlighted in one background color and the individual word will be highlighted in another. So that's based on dyslexia research. in terms of, and it's designed to help in two ways. One is obviously to provide focus on the individual word as it's read through. And the second, in text-to-speech in general, is of course to help reduce that cognitive load and hopefully improve comprehension, because we want students to be able to listen to the words at the same time as reading it alongside. Now, there are a number of ways that we can use this tool to support individual students. So for example, I can go up to my settings here, and you'll set this as standard for each of your individual students, and I can go to my speech. And what I can do is I can switch on continuous reading, so it'll just continue to read the passage. I always suggest for SEN students that we leave that off, so it's always reading sentence at a time, and the pupils prompt to move to the next one. But I'm going to turn on speak on each word, okay? And if I go to speak on each word here, what I've got the ability to do, let's say I was answering a question here, I was doing some writing and I was doing some typing. As I type, it's going to give me the word read back. So that's obviously going to help me with spelling, with perhaps correct choice of word. It could help me with punctuation. But as I type,
Make it up
and press the space bar, then I'm going to get that word automatically read back to me. If I put a full stop, because I'm doing my punctuation correctly, I'm going to get that read back to me as well. So it's a very useful point of trying to help build sentence construction within there as well, and correct word choice, and also to support spelling, punctuation, and grammar. So there's lots of ways that text-to-speech can help, and we build the text bit in to lots of additional areas that can support your students. So here's another example. If I were to struggle with this word, perhaps it may be to read the word, to pronounce the word, perhaps it may be this is a new piece of vocabulary and I need some additional help on that. Well, I can go up and I can get a dictionary definition. So we simplify the dictionary definition, okay? So this is our Key Stage 2 dictionary on at this moment in time. So I can get the word read back.
Noun. The third planet from the sun.
And I can get that read back. The other thing I can do is I can get a picture dictionary. So this is, you'd be familiar with these symbols. These are the widget symbols library. And so they should be familiar with students that are used to the widget symbols. If not, they provide a sort of a standardized reference for students. But an interesting thing about this is that students or yourself can take the image and they can drag it in alongside the word. So if they drag it in alongside the word, they now have a picture link up reference, and I'll show you a couple of different ways we can use this in a second, but they have that directly with, there's my front door going, they have that directly with the word aligned with the image. So I can do that easily from that picture library, and I'll show you a couple of different ways we can use that. Another thing that we have to help writing is a thing called prediction. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep up the dictionary and the picture dictionary and show you how all these things together could support students with building sentences and also right word choice and building vocabulary. So if I go down to this bottom answer here, so I could go all the way out and I could start this sentence again, okay? And what I'm going to do is flick on my prediction, okay? So students find this great to aid with their writing. And you'll see right where the cursor's flashing just down here, you'll see this choice of words that they're presented with, okay? So as I type, it will start to give me, and it's probably going to jump up because of my screen size, it'll start to give me some options here for the words that I might want to pop in. So I can hover over each individual word to get some help on it.
Have.
Okay, so I'm going to start typing, and I'm going to start typing make.
Make it.
What might my next word be? Okay, and you'll see a list of words here. I know, I think it's this word I want, but this is going to read it back to me. It's going to give me a visual reference. It's going to give me a word reference as well. Okay, so prediction will build a sentence in context, but importantly, it'll let your students listen to the word and also get the dictionary and the picture dictionary reference back as well. So those are a couple of ways we have access to text-to-speech. And of course, this session is not designed to train you on this tool and the ins and outs of it. It's to give us a sort of a starting point of what we might want to use. So one other thing, and we'll talk about accessibility on this. So got a resource here, and this resource has a diagram within it. And this text is not accessible. This has maybe been copied as a screenshot. It maybe hasn't simply been produced as an accessible diagram, but perhaps we need students to be able to listen to this word. They need to connect the text with this image and perhaps can't match this word up. So we have this one, screenshot reader, and here we can get students to drag a box around it. And in a second or two, that's going to
Mantle.
recognize that word and allow the students to play it
Mantle.
back. Okay, it'll also allow them to get the picture reference and the dictionary reference to try and help build that vocabulary knowledge as well. So that will give us playback wherever we need it. Okay, now if we think about students from a reading perspective, so some things that are helpful here above and beyond text to speech. So screen masking. So screen masking, you'll all, I am sure, remember the days of acetate overlays for whether it be to aid with dyslexia, students with scotopic sensitivity, or simply to reduce distractions on screen. We now have that available in anything you're doing within your Chrome browser. So if you're reading a web page, a Google Doc, a PDF, whatever it happens to be, this screen mask facility is there. So that's going to help us reduce distractions. It's also going to help us focus, and we can change all of the settings on that. So for example, if I want up here, I can set this height and I can reduce this way down. So I can start to use it as simply a ruler underneath a section, or I can set it to be a single line at a time as an example as well. But I can also change the background color. So I have popular colors here. So my yellow color here for a standard overlay screen mask. Or what I could even do is pop in, if I have a particular identifiable need for this, and the optician has given your pupil an actual code that would help them, you can actually put that optical code directly in there. So I now have the ability right here to have this screen mask and this overlay, or the ability to reduce distractions or just help guide reading one line at a time. And students can either use, depending on their access, can either use a mouse to drag that, or can use the arrow keys and they can move it down one line at a time. And to switch it off, we just pop back up here. Okay, so there's a wide range of ways that we can help students with these, and hopefully you're starting to see how those might map across. Things that we wouldn't have time to go through today is we have dictation. So dictation is built in. You're probably using that with your students within Google Docs anyway, but it's now built into our toolbar, so they can dictate. So they can simply speak naturally and dictate the writing directly in. They can also apply things like voice notes. So if you've been using things like Mote or stuff like that, they can apply voice notes, or you can provide feedback on voice notes for a piece of writing on there to students as well. So they can record their voice, maybe expand on their learning or a little bit of an extra explanation, and listen to their own voice back. So I'm going to look at one last thing here on the toolbar, and that is these buttons here, or I like to call them our digital highlighters. So the highlight tools in 4 colors. And here's a couple of ways that are very useful that we can use this. So think about students who are coming across new vocabulary, who need a defined word list with a standard piece of content, for example. So let's take this. Let's say this is the first time they've been introduced to this particular resource. And what you could do here is you could, either you or your pupil, could highlight a word and mark it with the tool. Okay, so we can mark it with any of these 4 color tools, and you hopefully start to see that because we've got 4 colors, we can start to do grouping. So if we wanted a pupil to identify nouns and adjectives and verbs, we could do that and use color coding for that. But what I'm going to use this for is this tool here. So this is to help support and build vocabulary. And all I have to do is highlight the words that I want my students to focus on, and I'm going to press the vocabulary button. And what this does is it now goes away and it will produce a vocabulary document. And this vocabulary document is done entirely automatically. It just builds a new Google document. So this could be done by your students, or it could be done by yourself. And now this will give the individual word. It will give the meaning of the word that you saw in the dictionary. It will also give the widget symbol reference for the word as well. and it'll give you an additional notes column. And of course, you could change that around, and you could change that. This is a standard Google document. So if I want to change that to something else, I could do that and start to build an activity. But at the very least, it's a very useful tool to draw out key parts of vocabulary and help students with those. And remember, they also have the ability on this to still use text-to-speech.
The hard center part of a fruit that
to have that read out loud. Two last things on speech before we move on. One is they can, of course, change the speed in which that's read out, so they can slow it down to a level that suits them. They can also change the accent and the language, so they could come up with a regional accent, or if English is perhaps not their first language, they could change it accordingly. But they can also change the translation side. So let's say you had a student and their first language happened to be, I don't know, say Arabic. They're obviously studying through the medium of English, but they struggled with a new piece of vocabulary. The translation tool could help support them, because it'll take one word and it'll play it back in their mother tongue, their first language, and help them. So for EAL students as well, a lot of those features are very useful. So I'm going to close that. And one last thing, at the very outset, I talked about universal design for learning. And one of the premises in and around that is, how do we give students, pupils, access to alternative formats of content? So if it's just content we're giving them rather than anything more active, how do we actually help them decide how they want to consume or study that piece? So I'm just going to clear these things off. Okay, so one button I have, which is very useful, is this. So all I'm going to do here is select the entire page, and I'm going to pick up Audio Maker. And if I press Audio Maker, what that's actually done is it's taken all of the text that was on the page, it's converted it to text-to-speech in the background, and it's now what it's doing. You'll see it going to a white screen here. It's now saved that as an MP3 file. So now what you've given your pupils the ability to do, or you've given yourselves as support teachers the ability to do, is take any content and convert it into spoken word. So students may be more comfortable with that piece. It may aid in their comprehension because they're listening while they're reading. They may not want the dual highlighting on, but they can still listen as they read through. They may want to listen to it on a mobile device or at any other time. They now have that because this file is available to them. And that will match their settings. So if they've set a really slow voice and they've set a Scottish accent, then that's exactly how they'll get that delivered to them. So we're giving your pupils a different way to consume that content. So that's us in a Google Doc. This also works in Google Slides. But for me, one of the really important areas that it's going to work is on a web page. And there's a couple of extra things here on the web page. So I'll not go through what we went through there, but obviously we've got the ability to have this read aloud. We get the dual highlighting. We get the ability to find definitions, to build word banks, to highlight content. If we are filling in a form or it's an online piece, say it's in Google Classroom, we give them the ability to have that prediction tool so it can help them build sentences and stuff as well as they go. So all of those tools are available there. But there's a couple of extra things I want to show you just on this side. Okay, so I'm going to open the toolbar again, and the toolbar any minute now is going to appear on the top of my screen. Let me refresh this page and see where we go. So let's give the toolbar a second or two to open. And once this opens, I want to look at two additional buttons right here on the screen. One of which is the ability to practice reading aloud, and the second is to allow us to simplify the page. I'm not quite sure why it's not opening for me, but we'll just see. Let me just close this down. So let's go back to this page. I'm going to close my Read and Write for some reason. Sorry, guys, that's too many instances of my Read and Write open today in demos. With a bit of luck, this is going to open. If not, we'll open a brand new tab. So let me go new window. And we'll go to our NAS piece. And let's open this tab up. it's taking its merry time today. So there's two things I'm not going to be able to show you as we go through here. I'm not quite sure. I think with 400 windows open here, it's going to let me down today. But there are two important things that you can do within a web page within Read and Write. One of which is there's an additional button there, and actually I can show it to you just on this last tab here. So let me go across to here. Okay, I'll show you here. And there's this tool called Practice Reading Aloud. And what Practice Reading Aloud will let you do, or a student do, is for a web page or for a document or for a PDF, it'll turn it into a reading piece that they can record themselves reading and send it to you. So if I press, well, I can't actually do it in that page. If I were to open this web page and I were then to press the button, what it's going to do is it's going to strip away all of the extra content that you see. It's going to leave the standard text, and it's going to give me the ability to practice reading aloud just by recording my voice. That then automatically gets sent to you as the teacher, and you can perform assessment pieces on it. So you might want to mark it for hesitations or mispronunciations. You might want to see what words students struggled with and maybe use the dictionary on to help them with that. The other thing is that on a web page, we also do a thing called Simplify. Now, Simplify is very useful for students who don't cope very well with distractions. So you take a typical web page like you see right now. This web page has lots of distractions on it. The Simplify feature will remove all of those distractions and then let your students set the font size or the contrast and overlay. It will also let them set the font type. So if they prefer or need an open dyslexic font, as an example, we can do that directly in a web page. So apologies for that one not functioning. I am
Patrick,
going to...
did you want me to quickly share and then you talk through it, or?
Yeah, what I might do is, what I'm going to completely do is I'm going to close down this browser and just start a new browser instance right now. And let's just see if we can get this going for you guys, because I think it's really important. And if not, Rachel will do it that way. What do we see? Let's just see if we can open this one up. Rachel, do you want to share there then? And
Yeah, no worries.
Yeah, rather than me closing down all my browser windows.
There we go.
Okay, so we're straight there. So if you press the Simplify button, so top right hand side, and press that Simplify button, you'll see there that what it's now doing is it has stripped off all the extra content. The Simplify button up the top left, though, will start to reduce that further. So if you just hit the minus button maybe twice there, Rachel, on that, this means that your pupils can start to set their reading level within this. So it won't reduce the vocabulary, but it'll reset the volume of text and how much a student would have to cope with in terms of reading. And you can simplify that down to anything up to 7 different levels. If you go to just black on white there, Rachel, as well then. So if you go to black on white and maybe change that to white on black. So for any web page, we can set the contrast. So we can set that to high color mode. And then we can also go to the font section as well there. And we can just use the slider and change the font to increase the font size, or we can change it to a more dyslexic friendly font. And remember, when we're doing this and we're giving pupils access to very specific help like this, we still have the ability to use all of the text help tools that we saw earlier. So the dictionary, the picture dictionary, the text to speech, all of those things are still there. So we can select words on there and we can get access to that. And of course, that can all be read aloud as well. So that's Simplify. It's a really good way to start to adjust reading levels and give students more control over the level of reading that they have on screen. So maybe, Rachel, if you just go back to the original NASA page and we'll just show you very briefly what I meant by the Practice Reading Aloud. So if you tap the Practice Reading Aloud button, and hopefully you're ready, you should be registered up for this one, Rachel, I think. So what this should do is convert this to a single web page. So what it's doing right now is in the background, it's processing it and it's making it into something that's a little bit more readable. So now what you've got is that entire web page that is now turned into a more user-friendly way to read. We can again change the levels. We still have our screen masking, we have translation, we have our dictionaries, we've got our text-to-speech. But for now, if we're trying to encourage students to read out loud, your pupils can simply press the record button. So if you just press the record button there, and as you press, so the US Space Agency, NASA, has formally outlined, etc., we press the stop button. After we've pressed the stop button, your students can then press the little paper aeroplane button, and that will get sent directly back to you. Okay, you got to set this up through Google Classroom in order to get it assigned to the correct teacher. So we'll have to go through that process and set up a Google Classroom. But once that's done, it means that it'll automatically go back to you as a teacher. So you'll see that directly as an assignment coming back to you. So that's great, Rachel. Thanks for the rescue on that one.
No worries at all. We've all been there.
I know, yeah, absolutely. And I think we're all becoming a little bit more understanding about it as well. So let me go back to my screen. So my screen should be back on there. So last thing to mention here when we talk about read and write is that pupils can get access to all of these accessibility tools and these reading and writing supporting tools in PDFs as well. So they get access to it on that and also on EPUBs. So PDFs, web pages, and full reading, writing, comprehension support on docs. And don't forget slides. So that's the first part of today done. And we're going to really jump into the second part here. So I'm going to go and I'm going to try and open up let me just see if I can find this document. So let's just see. So let's go over and open up a primary maths document. Now, this tool that we're going to see, and we're going to see it, I want you to think about it in a similar way that we looked at read and write. So yes, there are lots of buttons, absolutely. But that gives students and pupils multiple ways to be able to input maths. So the reason Equatio was designed originally was a recognition of we're using our Chromebooks, we're using the Chrome web browser, we're using Microsoft Word, but we need a way for pupils to engage with maths on these digital devices. So many of us have been there with rote practice and drill and practice apps and tools and platforms. This is about creating maths on terms that suit the students better. So I'm going to show you the toolbar piece within Google Docs, but I just want you to bear with me on this because where it really comes into its own in primary is a much more visual way to illustrate maths. But I want to show you the buttons first of all and how your pupils may be able to use those. So this is an extension. So we can open up the extension right here. Okay, and the toolbar is now on the bottom of my screen. So again, like read and write, for primary, we're probably going to switch some of these tools off so as we don't confuse our students. At primary level, we don't need LaTeX because we really only need that when we're in higher education. We probably don't need STEM tools, a scientific calculator and a periodic table of elements, so we can switch all those off. So we'll ignore those for today. But the fundamental thing about Equatio is that it allows us to start to create maths. So let's say, for example, we want to create maths by typing. So we could do that, okay? So we could just type a simple fraction, type a quarter, and we can insert maths into our document. Now we could be doing this on a slide deck as well. So what happens here is that maths is in. Now, what's important about this? Two things. One of which, if I hover over it as a pupil, I'm going to get the text, okay? But also I can get it read out loud. So I can go down to Equatio, press my screenshot, and I can simply drag over that, okay?
1/4.
Okay, so I can get this read out loud. So any maths content, I can start to listen to the spoken word directly within here as well. So I start to know that I can explore maths in different ways, not just that visual notation on screen, but I can also listen to it. So if, for example, I did something like, let me just do something really simple. So I'll say 59 plus 61 equals, okay? So just a very simple addition. And I pop this in. Okay, there are ways that I can help my pupils with this. So this may be on a worksheet, but what I might want also is to give them the spoken word beside that as well. So I can go to my bottom of my screen, spoken text, and all I need to do here is underneath each of the maths lines, I can start to put in the words. So I'm building the vocabulary of maths here as well. And of course, with Read and Write, I can listen to that out loud also. So there are simple ways to type things. That can be a challenge at times. So we've given additional ways for our pupils to express maths. Now, one of them is this one. So we've got handwriting right here. Okay, so let me just move the cursor down. And if my very poor handwriting using a mouse, if I wanted to write the same thing, I could write directly on my screen. So if I had a touchscreen Chromebook, I could use my finger, I could use a stylus. If I had an iPad because I was studying at home and didn't have my Chromebook at home, I could write on screen. And your pupils can start to expand that out on their screen. And what's really useful about that is if students prefer to write and handwrite maths, they can do this in multi-line as well. So if they're doing a long division, if they're doing something, anything more complex than a simple one-line piece of maths, they can write on multiple lines here and it'll start to display it across the side. So that's going to help them with accuracy as well, and also from a dexterity perspective. So if I close this, another way that's really useful to give students the option to express maths in different ways is the speech input as well. So I can click the speech input and I can start to record me dictating my maths. So I can press the speech input, 1/4 plus 1/2. And I can actually dictate maths. And you'll notice there that on purpose I did 1/4 plus 1/2 because I wanted to show both sides of how we might talk about a fraction. And so it will determine multiple ways that maths can be expressed and pop it directly on the screen. Now I can do multiple lines with this. So if I were a pupil and I either preferred or I needed to use dictation rather than actually use handwriting or do book work, I could speak directly into this. And what's really nice about this is that any hesitations that crop up with your students when they are reading out. So if I said 1/4 and put a delay and a hesitation in there, an an and a but, whatever it happens to be, it's only going to pick up the maths pieces. Okay, so it's not going to recognize the hesitations and the additional words that I might put in. If I stop because I need help from somewhere, it's only going to recognize the maths. And I just need to press an insert maths button. And from an accessibility point of view, this is all usable by switch access. It's all usable by shortcuts. So however your pupils want to interact, they can do it with these tools. So these are the core tools that are provided within Google Docs. One of the tools that is really useful, which we won't have time to demo today, but is this concept of Equatio Mobile. Now, why that's useful. So perhaps learning is happening online. Learning is happening on a device in school, wherever it happens to be learning. But you will still, of course, have students and pupils that want to do written book work. Maybe you need to strengthen written book work. What Equatio Mobile lets them do is continue to do that if that's the way they want to approach or need to approach their maths. They can still write it down. They could still complete a manual worksheet if that's the way that they find useful to them. But to submit it digitally, they can take any mobile phone. It doesn't matter what type of phone it is. They don't have to install an app, and they just snap a picture of their maths. And when they snap a picture, it automatically puts it right into this document. So if you take as an example, if I go to, say, a slide deck right here, okay? So I'm going to open up a slide deck, and I'll go into the last one I had open, which is this Equatio piece. Now, this is just a blank slide deck, so maybe we want to give students the ability to complete activities on this, okay? They can have access to all of these tools right here, right now, but they've got a really nice canvas. So perhaps they're still doing book work, and that's what they need to do or want to do. They can take a photograph of their book work and put it right in here. So the same assignment, the same piece of work can be used by a student at the very highest level of mathematics achievement, or at a struggling level, or at a level that just wants to be able to articulate themselves differently on the same piece of resource that we've sent out. And what we're going to see here is how we can start to use shapes, etc. within here as well. Okay, so for example, let's explore a button within slides that can be very useful. Insert math space. So let's say we were creating a question for a student. We want to do it visually. Let's go down a math space and press this button. So you're going to be taken to another screen. I'm going to show you a second way to use this so pupils can have more independence to do what they want to do within maths and express it in their own unique ways. But this is about fractions. So as well as all the buttons we had, we've also got this smart shape piece. So I'm going to go here to a fraction circle, okay? And now I can draw a fraction circle, and I can set the number of segments, the number of shaded segments, and all I have to do is populate that directly in. Okay, so I populate that, and it's going to insert directly into my Google slide and into my resource. So now I have this visual reference of maths directly in here. As a teacher, I've created it, but as a student, we're starting to give them visual ways that they can start to represent on screen. So if we put a simple number on screen and we ask them to put multiple ways to represent that number or vice versa, we're now giving them the tools to do that. So we can do this in Google Slides, and we can give them all of these rich tools. So let me just show you how good those tools get. So I'm going to go to a web page, and this web page is what we call Math Space. And it's just a web page, so it means that any of your pupils can access this at any time. So this is useful from a couple of different perspectives. One of which is, if I had targeted support and I wanted to give a specific activity to stretch, challenge, or support an individual student, I could create an activity specifically for them, or I could simply create the same activity for the whole class. To do that, all I do here is I can create a new space. So we're not going to go through the training piece of this, but I just want to show you a couple of examples on this. So what might we do? Maybe this is number representation on here. Okay, so I'm going to ask a student to give me a display of the number, or present a number on screen based on some images that I'm going to present. Okay, so I can add in right here. Let's go gingerbread man for today, just because I was watching Great British Bake Off last night. So now I can start to put in multiple gingerbread men on the screen. So my question at this point is, I'm asking my student to represent that as a number. So think about what I've been able to do. And I could go back here and my student could simply go, well, actually, that's a 5, and just type the 5 in. They could go and they could handwrite the 5. They could go and they could speak the 5 directly in. So they have multiple ways that they can start to put the 5 in. But also, they've got freehand. So if we just want to give this out to a student and we want to give them a different way to represent the number, we could do it right here. Equally, if we wanted to create another example, we could just say very simply at the top here that we want you to put 5 things directly in here. So this, in the hands of your pupil, is going to give them a really easy pictorial way, because they can import images. So I'm going to put in here, for example, 5 leaves. Oh, I'm going to put in 5 leaves on this one. So let me pick that up and let me pick my leaf up. So copy, paste, paste, paste. Okay, so I now have 5 leaves in here. So for sorting activities, for building individual supports for students, we're giving them different ways to insert content, and we're also giving them different ways to express content visually. Really usefully, if I were to put in, say, for example, I was doing a piece on estimation right here, right now, I could go down to my shapes and I could start to draw a very simple rectangle. And my question could be, look, this is 10 centimeters. I could very easily pull in then something like this, which would give me a, let's see if we've got it. So there's a pencil, okay. So we could pull a pencil in, line up the pencil, and maybe that's a very quick way to have an estimation activity based around that. But we've given pupils access to all these buttons. So they've got hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of shapes here. So if you had, for example, a coin activity, I now have access to my coin. So if I want to do a sorting activity, I want to do a change activity, I can do that And this is all through the Chrome browser. So it means that your pupils have access to these many more visual ways to illustrate that. Now, we've got things like your Cuisinier rods as well. So if we're doing some simple maths pieces, I can split those up and I can have my units, I can have my singles, and I can have all the way through to 10. I have deans, I have my number squares. Any support that you might need for any level of primary maths is built right into this shape section here. So we've got strong visuals for our students at all levels. I've also got this one last thing that I'll show you here, which is this smart shape. So if I'm doing a time activity, I can pull in the clock, I can switch the labels on and off on the clock, I can set the specific time on the clock. So I can not only produce activities that are targeted for individual support for students, but remember, back to where we started, we've got all of these tools that will help students articulate maths in a different way. Now, one of the ways that we've found this used across a number of different schools is when we allow students the freedom to use all of the manipulatives and the shapes and the tools that are within Equatio Math Space, and we partner that, and I'm not quite sure what you guys are using for screen recording, but for example, a number of our schools are using Screencastify. So you've now given those students a visual tool. You've given them the ability to record and articulate their learning and demonstrate that by voice. And you've given them the capability to do that, record their picture if they want to do that, depending on your requirements. So when we start to add these pieces together, we've given them a really comprehensive way to explain learning in terms that they can engage with along the toolbar. So the last thing I'll show you on this piece. So let's assume for one instance, okay, that what we have done here is we've created an activity for a student or a particular set of students that perhaps needs support, or we just simply want to give them this maths piece in a very specific way. We can share this out. So I'm going to say, just for today, I'm going to put that down as Leo, and I want to share this activity set out with my students. So from a technical standpoint, really easy, right? So I can go through and I can press continue and I can automatically share that out through Google Classroom, and they'll get it as an assignment. As soon as they click the link, it's going to open up right here, right now. What you've given them by assigning that task is the ability to complete it without time limits. You've given them the ability to complete that fully within Equatio Math Space. But they have that magic button, and that magic button is this changes to my little paper airplane, which means that your pupils can send it back to you digitally, and you can now start to review exactly how they've approached that individual piece of learning. So it's a great visual way to look at maths. Now, if I go back to this screen, okay, on this screen, I can start to build up a resource area of maths here. So for example, I have one that I do for DFE primary maths, and this is a resource. So this could be my teaching resource, but basically it means when we're doing an in-depth there, I can start to go through number lines, like the estimation, the counts, the coin purses, the sorting activities. I can create equations through pictures that have been imported. I can start to talk about tangrams. But why I want you to see this is that there's something interesting here on this. This acts as an assignment tracker as well. So this will show me, if you've sent this out to 3 specific students, this will show me when they've sent it back. It'll also show me how long they took to complete that particular question piece. I can mark it, but really importantly, I can provide feedback to it. So if I were to go to something like this page, okay, and for example, I wanted to provide feedback. Of course, nobody's submitted that piece I've just created. But if I go back to any of these pieces, so here's a piece that was sent back to me by a student, and that was sent back by me. I can open it up and I can provide some individual feedback on that as well. So I can produce marking, I can produce text. The importance of Equatio is it gives students the ability to articulate their thoughts in any way that they so need. This is going to work in standardized PDF practice sheets with questions, and it's also going to work on the web as well. So accessibility, just as one last thing. So let me go and start a new tab, and I'm going to open up a piece of maths content here. So let me go to this. This is I think this is a Twinkle resource. So we've also got Equatio here. So I'm just going to think about accessibility for one instance and that relationship of the maths on paper to what it might sound like. So let me go up. Yeah, let me go to these first two. Okay. Equatio, open it up. I've got my screenshot reader. And as a student, I can just drag a box.
25 times 7 equals.
And it's going to read the maths back to me. So this is not a specialist resource. This is just a PDF practice sheet from Twinkle. If I were to go again on some fractions.
5/8 minus 3/8 equals.
So now I have the ability to have maths read back to me. Also, I would have the ability, see all those tools that we saw earlier? I have the ability now, because I have Read and Write, I have the ability to use all those important tools on Equatio to complete this maths piece. So because I have Read and Write and you have it in Leo, if I were to simply open Equatio again, do you know what? I could use a visual tool to express that maths piece. So if this were fractions, I could use visual tools to express my fractions and come up with the answer. I could express my answer visually. Or what I could do, of course, is I could just go here and I could just say, well, actually, 25 times, I'm just going to put it right. Well, that's 150, and I'm going to pop that right in there. So I'm going to pop the answer in. Again, going back to where we started, which is we're giving students the capability to express maths in ways that suit them for their individual need, whether that's visually or whether that's through voice. And so I'm going to leave that there in terms of we're a little bit early. I want to leave a little bit of time for some questions. So we've got about 10 minutes or so, I think, left on the clock. So I'm going to open it back up to you, Rachel, at this point and just see if from any of your colleagues there we have any questions that I can perhaps answer in terms of sort of strategies in using these things and how they might apply.
Yeah, so we're...
Nope.
There we go. If anyone does want to just unmute and ask any questions or to use the chat, I'll just give people time.
No problem. I'm going to stop presenting at this point.
I think I'm going to chip in there and just say that, you know, I was thinking about some of the children that we've been talking about recently in terms of like in our Senko meetings and stuff. And, you know, I'm thinking of a child, particularly in Key Stage 2, who is a child who is achieving and possibly underachieving because of underlying needs, but is achieving an expected level, possibly could be doing more. But the difficulty this child has is being able to record their reasoning for maths. And I think that, you know, getting it down on paper, and actually this child can do it. And so it's nice to see that there are tools available to give that child the option to record that reasoning. And there's a couple of different options there, isn't there, in terms of the actual recording, the dictation side of it. They could actually just verbally record their reasoning, and that becomes part of that activity. I just thought it was quite nice to kind of link it back to those children. And also, one of the things, I've got Nicola in the room with me, and one of the things we were talking about was that verbal feedback, the voice note bit, because quite often with SEND children, they can't, you know, for some of them, they can't read the feedback. So therefore, one, they maybe can't read it, or two, they maybe can't process what it is you're asking them to do. But if it's a verbal thing, that's much easier sometimes for them to understand. And I think there's some real kind of really powerful tools here for us to enhance not only sort of provision for our SEND children, for all children really.
Yeah, and we've got some mapping documents there that I'll send across through you guys after today, which go into much more detail because we didn't have time on the call today. So we'll highlight very specific dyslexia strategies, ASD strategies, visual impairment. So start to drill in the very sort of more identifiable needs rather than not general needs. So we can do that, and that's available there for Equatio as well.
That's great. And just, I suppose, while we've got all the Senkos on, I think because there doesn't seem to be any kind of questions. Is there any anyone got any sort of opinions on how we should roll this out to teachers within classrooms? What kind of approach you think would work for the staff in your school? They're all being very quiet. I might make them all put their cameras back on so I can see them. Oh, Anne's there. Well done, Anne. Any thoughts from anyone on how we roll this out to all staff?
I'm thinking possibly, Emma, that just thinking about our staff and our children is actually perhaps is to do it a slower process of perhaps thinking about specific high needs children and perhaps doing just a couple or a certain number and then doing a cascade sort of approach a little bit, because otherwise I worry that this will go out alongside a lot of other things and it looks absolutely brilliant. And then I worry it won't be actually used. So I think we could target certain children and say this is an actual intervention, or not intervention, but it's an actual, this is what we're going to be used to use and part of that provision map.
I completely agree with you, and I think what Rachel and Patrick will agree with me, I'm sure, from the and I think Cheryl's on here as well, from the conversations we had previously, is that it is about that. It's about almost them seeing the benefit of it with individual children so that then they can start to use it for everybody and it becomes part of that process. But I agree with you, Anne, if we suddenly present everything to everybody like this and say this is going to be great, use it all, the chances are they probably won't use it all, you know. So it is better to kind of go like we've just talked about. I mean, I think the training for teachers would be good to go, right, here is a child on the screen, here is this child, what is the child's needs, and what can we do now to support that using these tools so that actually they can unpick it, and almost giving them time to play with the tools while we're talking. So almost like talk about a tool and then 5 minutes for them to actually play with it on their own Chromebook or their own device, so they can, because not everybody takes it on from listening, do they? They like to play. If anything like me, I sit and play on another screen so that I've got it in my head. What do people think?
I've got an idea on that I can feed back to Patrick after it. I won't keep everyone here to say, but I've got a good idea for that.
Thanks, Rachel.
Emma, I sat with the year sixes just this week for their reading lesson, because they've got a kind of target group, sort of lower ability children, and they were looking at the text. We were looking at, some of them can read it, and some of them can't read it, but if it was read to them, they'd be able to understand, answer comprehension questions. So we used it this week, and some of them listened to it on headphones.
Brilliant.
Simplified it, but it was easy just taking like a couple of teachers in a small group and explaining it to them and trying it out, rather than trying to do a whole staff meeting on it. It was much easier to target specific children.
And what you're going to find is that other children will say to their peers, oh, try this, it's really, really good, this will really help you, and hopefully it will cascade that way as well.
Can I ask, Emma, I know Rachel was in on Thursday when Nicola and I were walking around, and I know that is a year group that really could benefit from this for the children and their needs, and we were writing a provision map today for one of those children. I mean, is that something, Rachel, you could do where, you know, you could kind of show them how to incorporate it, so we can show, as very much as Anne said, I think we need to target those children that we really think it's going to have an impact on, and then see that cascade. But is that something, I don't want to give Rachel more work, I'm really sorry, but I know she'd be far more capable than me.
Graham, could that not be part of the day when you're in, that people are timetabled to support in school? Because obviously that is all part of it, isn't it?
Yeah, it's absolutely fine. So the key in the kind of coaching model is to try and recognise what we're going to support. So maybe, for example, I'm just thinking of Rachel, Cheryl, myself, I don't know what school or year we're talking about here, but one of the outcomes of that coaching program is that we put in some provision that will support the challenge of X in child B. And I think, and as I was listening, a lot of things I was thinking about, it actually resonates quite well with our teaching program about EdTech around, like, actually, it's not about the Chromebooks, is it? It's about what we use them for and how we use them to enhance teaching and learning, not about, we've got text help, so that ticks the inclusion box. So yeah, I totally agree.
Brill. I think also that's a great approach from an inclusion perspective, because we're then using the strength of this, you know, the team that have got that the technology knowledge to actually enhance the provision plan, so that it shows that the support plan for that child isn't just being written by the class teacher and the Senko, that actually we're drawing on the strengths of everybody from across the school to make that the best it can possibly be. So I think that's a great approach. I'm not sure there's many schools that can say that will be happening. So that's a great place for us to be. Brill. Anyone got any other questions?
I think there was one practical one came in there, I think, on Jamboard. So you can use it with Jamboard, but not in the Jamboard. So the trick behind that is you open up a math space and you can copy any of those images directly into Jamboard. That said, about 3 weeks from now, there'll be full Jamboard integration with the toolbar working there. So for those,
Rachel's
Rachel, do not mention that on Twitter. You will steal my thunder.
I'm the Jamboard queen. You know it's mine.
Yeah.
That's great news. That's going to be amazing.
Brilliant. Patrick, thank you so much, because, you know, from my perspective, from an inclusion perspective, I'm thrilled to see this. I think one of the things that we've been talking about is many of us have used Clicker in the past. And obviously Clicker is a great tool for supporting children, but this does many of those functions, which is so pleasing to see. And I think it's going to be a great enhancement in the classroom. So thanks for sharing that today.
Oh, no problem. Welcome anytime. And hopefully it'll not be the last time we'll see you anyway. So there's plenty of help.
No, certainly not. Brilliant.
And I just wanted to come in and say, I know obviously we're wrapping up with conscious of time, but I just wanted to say that, you know, I didn't even know about the screenshot reader, and Cheryl sent me a message, and, you know, we both were like, oh, fantastic. We've suddenly got a solution to those scanned PDFs that have come from workbooks that teachers are continuing to use, which aren't accessible to any children in the class. They can't read it. They, you know, they can simply zoom in on the screen, but they can't actually access those PDF texts that they're using for English. And that's across every school that we work with. So actually having that option now that they can have that text read back is going to be huge.
We should maybe pick that up to, again, conscious of time for you guys. Pick that one up, because there is now a fully automated tool which, when a pupil opens an inaccessible PDF, it will automatically recognize that it's inaccessible and convert it to an accessible PDF. So that can be done in the background. Yeah, that as well.
I tell you, I was just saying to Nicola here that I wonder what this is going to look like in 5-10 years' time. Will it actually be able to take our brain waves and put that down on paper without us having to do anything? I'm looking forward to the future of being able to sit back in my chair and everything get done for me. It's going to be amazing. There's a challenge for you, Patrick.
That's it. I'm way to work on it now. I'm a secret lab downstairs.
Thank you very much. Thanks, everybody.
Come, guys. Have
Thanks,
a good
everyone.
Emma,
If you mind just staying behind.
Thanks.
You talking to me, Rachel, or no?
Yeah, Patrick, do you mind just staying for 1 minute?
Yeah, no problem. Yeah.
Unless you've got another training, of course.
No, no.
Sarah McGawley, I'll call you back in a second because I just need to catch Graham. All right. Thank you.
Although that said, Rachel, we're doing a lot